don't just wake up one day running or sprinting towards your goals. You fall down sometimes, but you get right back up.
An artist and activist is found stabbed to death outside of her residence in New Jersey. And after a call for the public's help in identifying her killer, a suspect has been arrested and charged. We break down what we know so far in this rapidly developing case with legendary former homicide detective Fil Waters. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Okay, we have this chilling story for you out of Somerville, New Jersey. It happened last week. 27-year-old artist and activist Maryrose Fealey was found stabbed to death on North Bridge Street right outside of her residence. A 911 phone call was placed on January 30th. Fealey was found stabbed to death by a relative around 10:20 p.m. Her car door was open. Some of her stuff, her belongings, were all across the front yard. First responders, they tried to save her life, but unfortunately, it was too late. And after authorities, they urged the public to come forward with information. An arrest has been made. 27-year-old David C. Shroitman of Brookside Avenue, Somerville, was apprehended and charged yesterday with first-degree murder, third-degree possession of a weapon, fourth-degree tampering with physical evidence, and third-degree hindering apprehension. Now, before we get into some of the details here about how he was caught, I just want to take a minute to talk about Maryrose. Talk about who we lost. So Maryrose Fealey, by all accounts, was a terrific person. She was an artist. She was an anti-drug activist. She worked with an organization in New Jersey called Not an Easy Fix that helped people fight addiction. She had reportedly even helped her own brother work through his struggles with substance abuse.
My background's in logistics and supply chain, right? Like my background is of a federal employee. And I'm bringing up my background as a federal employee because I'm very serious. I take life very seriously. Like, I have engraved in my mind that I'm on a mission here on Earth. Like, I'm on a mission, constantly on a mission.
I mean, Fealey recently posted a new profile photo on Facebook saying, "Cheers to 2024 being a beautiful year," but instead, just 11 days later, she would be found stabbed to death. The next night, committee members from Not an Easy Fix, they held a candlelight vigil at a church with about 100 people in attendance.
Because a lesson learned is a lesson shared, and your mindset is everything. And while you can't immediately change certain situations you find yourself in, having a positive mindset changes your ability to deal with that situation.
Fealey also had her own nonprofit. It was called For the Younger Me, which had gained quite a following on TikTok. Her work with her brother was featured in a documentary in 2021 that followed the two of them for 3 weeks. Then they did a follow-up piece where she and her brother were dealing with his drug relapse. So you can see that she affected so many lives in such a positive way. And to hear about her death is just absolutely so sad. But now we have an arrest. And for that, let me bring in legendary former homicide detective Fil Waters. Phil, it's good to see you again. I'm going to be fully transparent with our audience because we actually talked about this case yesterday before the arrest happened. Then we had all of this breaking news, and we said, you know what? Let's just redo it. Let's just wait to have this information, and we have a lot of information right now. So the Somerset County prosecutor, John P. McDonald, said, quote, "Since the discovery of Miss Fealey, investigators assigned to the investigation worked relentlessly to identify the suspect involved. And this past Sunday, authorities, they got a warrant to search Shroitman's vehicle in person, and oh boy, they arrested him around 11 p.m. at night. We'll get into some of the details. What's your reaction to him being caught?"
Well, kudos to the detectives. This is one of these cases that you rock and roll, excuse me, you rock and roll continually until you get your suspect in custody. So great job by those guys. This was something that, as you've already stated, what a great tragedy this young lady, this young woman was just a benefit to the community there. And there's no telling me how many people she impacted through her work.
Yeah, and let's talk about how they caught him. So it's interesting that first he was identified by word of mouth. Remember, there was a lot of information. They were asking the public for help. But really, the break in the case, what really happened, is they get this surveillance footage from a home on East Cliff Street, and it shows a man matching Shroitman's description running up and down East Cliff Street at about 9 p.m., the night that Fealey was killed. So that was that key time, right? That time between 8:30 p.m. and 10 o'clock, if anybody knew anything. Then investigators, they find Shroitman. They find him at a business. He wouldn't talk to them. They do notice something. They see this white garbage bag over the driver's seat of the car, a black gator that was in the front seat, and duct tape in the rear seat. So after they see the guy running on tape, they also see this vehicle on tape, and it looks like the car that he was driving. And so let's just start there, Phil. What do you think about the fact that the surveillance footage and his behavior is quite suspicious?
Oh, it's what kind of starts the fuse going, right? In terms of the investigation. So, yesterday when we talked about this case, I mean, there were the questions that I was asking was, association with her and the suspect, and do we know that, and so forth and so on. So now it's come out that there was some kind of a relationship there. So I'm curious as to what it is. Did she deal with him in terms of his addiction? Is he a friend of her brother's? So it's going to be interesting to see how that all kind of fleshes out. Now, the videos, the security cameras, I mean, that stuff is just becoming great pieces of evidence. And I'm assuming that they got the guy's name from a tip. That's what it kind of sounds like. And then they put together the videos, and he matches the description and on the videos and so forth and so on, the car. And they just go and track the guy down, and then he does some things, and they see some things in plain view that further connect him in a evidentiary way to the crime scene itself. So,
Well,
again,
I should tell you, when they found him, he was wearing latex gloves and was apparently cleaning his car, and they smelled bleach in this puddle that was near
right.
the car.
Yeah, in homicide, we'd call that a clue, right? So, it and a lot of this is timing, of course. I mean, and this is what I've said. When an investigation like this gets going, it just rocks and rolls until you get to the end of it, and at least in terms of getting a suspect in custody. And that's what these detectives did. So the timing was great in terms of finding him in the circumstances under which they found him, and which just affirmative links are popping everywhere from him to the scene.
Talking about affirmative links, so apparently they find one of these gloves. It has blood on it. Obviously, we don't know at this point if it is the victim's blood. It'll have to be tested, but they found blood in the entrance and bathroom of Shroitman's apartment. So on top of the fact the car was doused in bleach, now they find that.
Well, what's going to be interesting is in the stabbings of this nature that I've worked. In fact, one that where the suspect was wearing the latex gloves. Uh, I don't know how many times she was stabbed. That will come out eventually, but I'm gonna just guess that it was kind of a frenzied attack. Which, when you're attacking with a knife, it's a very personal thing, and it tends to get. It's not just one; it tends to be multiple. So, I'm curious to see if he may have cut himself, which is common when you have these kind of knife attacks. And if they find DNA evidence, blood on her, and then if the blood in the bathroom, if they find is in fact his, then that again it makes another connection that he cut himself. So, or it may be her blood.
Right.
We don't know at this point. So,
I'm also burying the lead. There is something else they found in his apartment that is, some would say, the smoking gun. Apparently, they found this manifesto that laid out step by step his plan to kill Fealey.
yes, and I will tell you, when they talked about that, when you just talked about the fact that they found duct tape in the car, that would indicate to me that his plan was, and it'll be interesting to see what the manifesto said, but his plan was to kidnap. The duct tape obviously would be used to cover her mouth, tape up her hands, and get her under control, and then take her to another location. And what if that was the plan, then obviously what happened was it got way out of control, and he was unable to execute that part of the plan. So the next step was, in a panic, was to kill her. So
But
yeah,
the
it's going
but
to be
the,
interesting.
the manifesto though, like, do people usually document this, and why do they document it?
Well, I would say no. The answer to that would be
Right.
no. You don't usually see this laid out plan uh, evident. So it's going to be interesting to see again what we talked about yesterday. What is the connection between him and her? What is that relationship, and why did he decide that he needed to write out a manifesto specific to what he was going to do to her?
Yeah.
So that stuff's to be revealed, and that's going to be very interesting in the investigation.
When I cover these kinds of stories, by the way, it just reminds me that when you walk outside, you really don't know what's going to happen. I know that's scary to think about, but it's the truth. And as a lawyer, I know that one of the most traumatic and stressful moments is if you get hurt, a work injury, a car accident, social security disability issues. These things happen. And if they do, you need a powerhouse legal team in your corner. Enter Ponley Hockey Giordano. This is not just a law firm, okay? No, they relentlessly advocate and fight for their clients' rights. I mean, we're talking about a team that has secured over $1 billion for more than 100,000 injured and disabled clients. You notice how I said team, by the way, because you would be getting access to the entire team with over 250 years of combined courtroom experience. So if you've been injured and you need legal support, check out Ponley Hockey Giordano at ponleyhockey.com/LC Sidebar, or you can call them at 833-669-4043. All right, let's get back into it. And let's talk about motive for a second. So it's our understanding that Shroitman knew Maryrose Fealey, and there is reporting to indicate that they were members of the same graduating class back in 2014 at Somerville High School. And clearly, if he was planning this, he of course, there could be somebody who would see somebody randomly and they could plan that. But the fact they had a connection, they had some sort of, or he at least knew who she was, and there was that kind of connection. We don't know if they were, what association or relationship they had in high school, but the idea that they knew each other. What do you think about that?
It's an indicator. I mean, when you have these homicides that, I've talked about it before. I would do psychological autopsies on the suspects, and that's going to be all part of this. Again, we've talked about it. What's the relationship? They're the same age. If they went to high school together, what was that relationship? Did they just know each other as acquaintances? Were they boyfriend, girlfriend? Was he somebody that knew her brother? And that's how she knew him. And so that will be revealed as the investigation goes forward and the facts start to come out. So uh, again, the plan targeted at her is what we will see is the reason why behind what was the motivation behind this.
Well, you
Go
mentioned
ahead.
this. You mentioned the stabbing to me when we previously spoke about it. That is a personal kind of attack. Does that give you an idea about a potential motive here?
Well, when a knife is used, especially in this kind of an attack, it becomes, I mean, depending on how many times she was stabbed and so forth and so on, in most cases, it becomes an overkill. So it's multiple stab wounds, which means that that person, once they got going, they got into a kind of a frenzied attack, making sure that what they were trying to accomplish was going to be accomplished. So, when we talked yesterday, that was my question because it is such a personal type of attack. What's the relationship? And now it's starting to get revealed, bit by bit.
Just a really, really sad case, and it's rapidly developing. I mean, right before we came on the air and talked about this, we just learned all these new details. So we'll continue to follow it and get to the bottom of why Maryrose Fealey was taken from her family and loved ones. I think that's important to understand. Fil Waters, thank you so much for taking the time, sir. Appreciate it.
You bet. Anytime, Jesse.
All right, everybody, that is all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. Please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.